Okay, this is December 5th, 2021, and we are going to record our first segment for Take 22. How do you think this will go?
Okay.
Awesome.
It will go okay. I'm just kidding.
Well, let's go.
You're listening to Take 22, a media production podcast hosted by Matt Gray.
And welcome to Take 22. I am Matt Gray, and I am here with my wife, Dre. How are you?
Hey, doing good? What's up on your podcast?
So, yes.
Haven't said that before.
Okay, so let's set the stage here, because you and I do a podcast called INDIEEYE Film Awards.
We do.
And where we talk about monthly submissions and winners for our online film festival, INDIEEYE Film Awards, that you can find via Film Freeway or go to INDIEEYEFilmAwards.com. And this is something we started in February of this year, 2021.
Correct.
And it's been a blast. We've learned a lot about what our capacity is for watching films.
And you're not, we're not talking about, Hollywood films. We're talking about, indie films.
Right. Well, and there's such a large population of indie films out there. Well, the reason we
Yes.
started INDIEEYE Film Awards was because over the years of having films submitted to film festivals via Film Freeway,
Yep.
it occurred to me that a lot of these festivals, and especially when the virus hit, and festivals couldn't be in person through 2020, and some are just continuing that in 2021, that festivals exploded online, and there just didn't seem to be a lot of follow through or people who were submitting. Even if you were an official selection, even if you were a winner, there just wasn't a lot of feedback.
Sure.
There wasn't any energy involved. It's like you got laurels and that was it. Now, what we try to do over at INDIEEYE is watch everything we're sent.
Yeah.
And we select films that are to run in competition. And additionally, once we've selected winners and updated our website.
Yeah, with links to their stuff so that everybody can go share and see and enjoy it.
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a part of it.
Yeah.
But we create a podcast every month, and we talk about the submissions and winners and kind of give a little bit of feedback, and just kind of what's going on with INDIEEYE for that month. And I have found that this is not only is it cathartic and therapeutic for me
As a filmmaker.
yes, and inspiring to me as a filmmaker, but also it's helped so many others. And I've been able to have conversations with other filmmakers and give feedback. And sometimes, it's not rosy. It's hardly ever that rosy. But I mean, there are certainly things that blow us away, things I'm really impressed with. And then there's things like, what's going on here? and there's you don't get a participation trophy with INDIEEYE Film Awards.
Right.
You've got to submit something of quality to be an official selection. And what's quality? Does it have to be airing on Netflix type of quality? No, not at all.
Oh gosh, absolutely not. That's not even really the stuff we want to see.
Just sell me on the fact that you tried and you completed what you set out to do. And I think most of the things we tackle over there, kind of sound issues, audio issues is usually the problem.
Yeah.
People who probably shot on the first draft of their screenplay,
Sure.
things like that. But it's been a great experience, and we've had a fun time doing the podcast. And there's not enough time doing the INDIEEYE Film Awards podcast. That's not a plug at all. For me to really get into what I'd like to talk about regarding filmmaking.
Yeah, sometimes you get to go on little tangents. So sometimes we can go down into the weeds a little bit about certain things and why certain things are important, but it really isn't the focus of that particular podcast.
Right. And I don't want to take up anybody's time who's listening to see something about, they want to hear something about their film. They want to, they don't want to hear about Matt's life. So, if you're listening to this podcast,
well, welcome to Matt's life.
This will be
That's
more.
what you're going to get.
This is really about what I do, experiences I've had, feedback I can give regarding what I've learned, and we'll talk about all of why I'm even qualified to be doing a podcast. And you're with me here now to kind of help get me started.
Sure.
And if there's listeners coming over from INDIEEYE, you know Dre. So it's a little bit of a segue into a whole other thing, and you can pop in and out throughout my podcast because we live together, so why not?
And I'm kind of interweaved into all of the filming of your life, essentially.
Have you been along for the ride?
Maybe except for ages 15 through, 21 when we met? I didn't know you during those years, but I know of those years.
Yes. So I guess we should set the stage for anybody who is new.
No.
And so Dre and I are married. We've been married for almost 21 years. Almost 21 years. We were married young. We had children young. And as younger people, we had no idea where we were going to end up. We had some interests, but what ultimately became our professions, we had no idea. Dream jobs.
Yeah, and we didn't go to college for these specific things. I mean, neither of us did this whole college. We didn't go away to college. We got jobs right away and worked our asses off for forever.
Yeah, it took. Things are pretty great right now. They could change at any second, but it was a long road to get here, and I'd like to share that with people so that it's not always overnight success. There's a lot of grind. You almost have to be sickeningly obsessed with creating to get through it all. And we've had some major lows and peaks and valleys and struggles to finally find ourselves in a place where we are comfortable and mostly free to create what we want when we want. And even when we're working, we're doing the things that we love.
Yeah.
So it's a very blessed situation.
Yeah, and different from what, our parents have done. Our parents grew up working for the same company, corporate job or blue collar job or whatever, and worked until X number of days and retired. And, we did not have that path. And the only thing I can say is I would rather be working, doing something that I really love until the day I die versus sludging it through some, job you hate just so that you can eventually stop working. Now, there's reasons for both things.
Everybody feels that way.
Yeah, I mean, there's reasons and pros and cons to both of those things. We just happen to see ourselves and find ourselves on this end of things, and maybe that's poor planning, or maybe that's the way God intended for things to go. But we're here, and I definitely feel like Matt specifically has so much value to share.
Wow! Thanks.
In the film and media production world. So you should listen because that's what you're doing right now.
She just wants me to go into my office and talk to you instead of bugging her.
Maybe. I do have my own podcast, I'm not going to plug it though. It's for a different audience.
No, but you should mention what it is you're doing now, because you're involved in quite a bit of creative work. And what is it that you do, Dre?
Well, I guess you could say one easy way to say what I do is I'm a graphic designer. So I create things on the computer, essentially. More specifically, I create things in the scrapbooking industry, in the memory keeping industry. I create digital products and a printed magazine, actually, for the creative memory keepers industry. And that's been going on for a few years, and that's kind of my baby. Other things I do, is just other content creation around memory keeping, home life, lifestyle things, and fashion.
And at which handle could people find that?
People could find that at Retro Hip Mama on Instagram. I'm that everywhere, actually.
Nice.
Thanks. But, Matt, what is it that you actually do?
Well, this sounds so cliche in the contemporary climate, but I guess I am a content creator, which is an all-purpose job description these days. I make videos professionally. I'm on a full-time retainer for a wide range of media production with my main client, which then lets me cherry pick freelance gigs, mostly corporate style work. I also consult for businesses and organizations on how they can do media production in-house if they want to build in a, way they can do video and have microphones and do their own post-production in-house. I'm a consultant for that. I also get to edit for some YouTubers, such as Girl Talks Fish. If you're into fish, you've probably come across Irene on YouTube. I do a little bit of editing for her, and Theramom. I also produce podcasts such as INDIEEYE Film Awards.
You don't say.
Take 22. And others that I do for work-related things that I just don't need to mention.
Yeah.
And then I can't help but work on passion projects, which is really what I've been doing since I was 13 years old. But kind of in the professional realm, I was doing short films and documentaries for a while, and now onto feature films, which I'll talk a little bit more about at some point. And hopefully, here comes a teaser. Hopefully, I'll have something to announce in the next episode of A Take 22. I am just waiting for something to kind of clear up before
the waiting.
Before I can actually feel good about promoting anything else. I will tell you where you could go to maybe get a clue of what I'm planning to announce right after these messages.
You don't have any sponsors.
And we're back. So what you could do, if you want a sneak peek at really anything that's going on regarding myself, maybe with the Take 22 podcast, or what I might be talking about in the future, or regarding the past, go to Instagram, and I'm at Mentality Films, my amazing social media account where you could see such things as my work desk or my silly car or what camera I'm using today.
Or what lens was recently delivered.
Perhaps what my fish are doing. And I'll let you go, Dre, because you're busy and I have other things I'm going to...
You're darn right I'm busy. Well, if you don't need me for anything else.
Well, no, I just wanted listeners from INDIEEYE to kind of have an easy way into Take 22. And I would classify you as an important part of my life.
Interesting.
You're a witness to most of the things that I do.
Uh-huh. As well as the wind beneath your wings, let's just be honest.
You are definitely beneath me.
Awesome.
We'll definitely have you pop in some other times for more things.
Cool. All right. See you guys later. Bye.
Well, it's almost Christmas, and that's a great time to talk about gear, because what better time of the year is there to have an excuse to buy gear? And I know there's a new lens under the Christmas tree for me, but what I'm really most excited about right now is not even coming until December 30th, because I pre-ordered a Sony A7IV. Now, I'm mainly a Sony shooter. I'm not a Sony fanboy. I'm an any gear fanboy that works really well. And currently, I love Sony. And I've loved Sony for about 3, almost 4 years now. I came from the Micro Four Thirds system with the GH4, GH5, the G7s, everything Panasonic was doing, which is still amazing. I love the GH4. I think the GH5 is one of the best cameras that's ever been made, but I needed something with a bigger sensor when I knew I was going to go shoot a film that took place mostly at night, and this was going to be more guerrilla style, run and gun. I couldn't make everything perfect with the lighting, so I needed a bigger sensor to capture that light. And at the time I was looking into this, Sony seemed to have the best system available, but no full frame options that I felt really good about. So I ended up buying an A6500, which is a APS-C sensor. And when compared to my GH5 that I was using mostly at the time, the low light was incredible, obviously with the bigger sensor. So I started to play within this Sony system and get some E-mount glass and have fun with the A6500, but it still wasn't quite perfect. Camera was a little weird. I didn't like the body. It's a little too small, too boxy. The screen didn't move the way I like the fully articulating screens like the Panasonic cameras have. And then boom, the start of 2018, Sony announces that A7 III for $2,000, a full frame, 4K body. It was a steal. It blew everybody away, and it was back ordered for so long, but I was able to jump right in as soon as they launched it to pre-order the A7 III, and I got it. Was able to shoot with that. And for the last 3 years, that's been my main camera. And as much as I love the A7 III, what I was really waiting for was the follow-up to the A7S II, legendary, low light performance, the A7S II. But it took Sony about 5 years to update the A7S line. So thankfully, at the beginning of 2021, my A7S III was delivered. And after my first real shoot with it, I was blown away by the image that was coming off this thing with very little effort. Loving the A7S III so much, I was thinking about getting a second body, but then Sony dropped the FX3. And at first, when I saw it, I was like, nobody's asking for this. An FX3, it's the A7S III in a different body. Who cares? And it's more expensive. It's like $500 more expensive because they have an audio handle adapter that comes with it. And I'm like, nobody wants this thing. And then I realized I'm actually the one who wants this thing because it's the same sensor as the A7S III and has all the same functionality of it, but it's a little bit different form factor. It has different mounting points on the body. It doesn't have the viewfinder, so it's just easier to adapt things to this particular body. So what it's become for me is the perfect static shot camera. While it can do everything else, I love sitting it down, locking it off, building up around it for an interview, a testimonial type of situation. Anytime I need to get people on camera in a location, I like to set that FX3 up, which frees up my A7S III so that I can run around and capture B-roll. And a lot of times these are the situations that I'm in, where you need to be able to shoot interviews with people, but it's handy to have a second body so that you can go run and gun and capture all sorts of other stuff in between having interviews. And with these two cameras matching perfectly, the color science and their capabilities, the A7S III and the FX3 has become an amazing combination for me. But it kind of left my A7 III as the odd camera out, and I still loved it. I was actually sentimentally attached to the A7 III because it was my first full frame camera, so I felt like a big boy, and I was able to use it to shoot my recent feature film. So it's been through a lot with me. All sorts of types of production. I really started getting into hybrid photography with the A7 III, so I was doing photographs and video and mixing it up, getting better, finally working in Lightroom, because these are things I hadn't done before. I certainly do not consider myself a photographer. I can take pictures, I can work in Lightroom a little bit, I do things to my taste, but I am nowhere near a professional photographer. And anytime a client says, hey, can you just take a few pictures for me? I tell them this up front. I am not a photographer. I have too much respect for photographers to call myself a photographer. I know several very talented photographers. I am not these people. We may be using some of the same gear. It's a completely different skill set. That said, I love to take pictures now because it's kind of a release for me, or more of a low pressure approach to creating. Because when I'm shooting video, it's constantly this mind frame of this needs to be perfect. I'm looking to get these certain things, and clients are paying me to do this, or I'm trying to create something very specific. But when I'm just taking a walk with my dog and shooting photos, there's no pressure. Nobody wants anything from me about it. And I can just find what looks like art to me. And it's a nice exercise to try to develop your cinematography eye by creating stories in a single frame, taking photography. So the A7 III allowed me to get more into that. And while it was certainly a great camera to have, I was using my A7S III way more. I mean, in my opinion, the color science was just better. It just in any sort of standard mode or auto white balance mode with things where I was working quickly, it was just way better. The A7 III still had that bit of green to it, like the older Sonys did, which didn't bother me as a standalone camera. But when I was working with the A7 III and the A7S III together on a project, the difference between the sensors and the color was kind of just messing with me. I didn't like it, and probably most people that you're doing client work for don't necessarily see these differences. It's those of us who are sitting and editing and working with these images over and over and over for hours and hours and hours, then we can start to notice. Nevertheless, it bothered me, but Sony announced the A7 IV. Yay! The A7 III was finally being upgraded, and immediately I decided I'm just selling my A7 III. It's never going to be a higher value than right now. And I know for a fact I'm going to pre-order the A7 IV. I didn't even know all the stats for the A7 IV yet. A lot of the information hadn't been released. I just knew it was going to be announced. I mean, there were rumors and everything, and it sounded logical of what this camera would include. But I just knew that I needed something more contemporary from Sony to replace my A7 III. Because as wonderful as the A7 III was, it still had that old 30-minute record time limit, which is very frustrating when you're working with multiple cameras on a production and you have to mind that 30-minute limit. And that's my main gripe, but also still had the old tilting screen. It didn't have the brand new Sony style menus, which I really love. And it was an older format. The body style was a little bit older. The A7S III is kind of chunkier, a little bit more premium. The buttons feel better. It just fits better in the hand, and things are more logical on the body. And sure enough, the Sony A7 IV is that Sony A7S III body style. And it does have the fully articulating screen, the bigger grip, the chunkier buttons, and it has more than I actually was anticipating because it's got a 33 megapixel sensor. So we're actually getting a little bit of a bump from the, what was it? I think a 24 megapixel sensor from the A7 III. I can't quite remember now, but so you're getting a little bit more out of it. It's also got 4K 60. People will complain that that's in a crop mode. You got to step down to like an APS-C size on your sensor to get 4K 60 on the A7 IV. That's not a problem for me. I don't know. Back up a little bit. It's not a big deal. I mean, it wasn't too long ago. People were just begging for 4K 60. And you get 4K 120 on the A7S III and the FX3. And now you get 4K 60 on an A7 IV. And there are people out there going, oh, it's a crop. Oh, I don't want to shoot in a crop. Oh, come on. Seriously. Get a wider lens, I guess. But it has all of those A7S III amenities now with the full HDMI port, the better quality port doors. It's got the shutter closes to cover up the sensor, which has astounded me for years, that you take your lens off the body and the sensor's just staring at you. It's exposed to the world. And I'm pretty quick at exchanging lenses. But, you know, no matter how fast you are, how careful you try to be when you have your sensor exposed, something's always going to get in there. And if you don't catch that little piece of dust that just happens to fall onto your sensor, your video or photo from the rest of that day could be absolutely ruined, because you're going to have a little speck on the screen that you have to deal with in post. So just being able to cover the sensor with the shutter is super nice. Now, it'll be interesting, time will tell, to see how effective this actually is, but at least Sony thought about it and it's there. And there's, of course, no 30-minute record limit, and it's going to have the same color science as the A7S III and the FX3. So the A7IV has been pre-ordered. I'm super excited about that, but they don't ship until December 30th. And what does that even mean anymore? I have no idea. It took me an extra 2 months to get the A7S III, and I pre-ordered that, but there were so many pre-orders that it was taking several batches and a lot of time for people to receive their cameras. And it's not life or death if I don't have an A7IV on the first batch. I'm not even expecting it. In my mind, I'm like, if I have it first week of February, then that's great. I consider that a win. I didn't pre-order on day one when it launched. It was within the first week, so it's not like I'm first in line or anything. So I would be okay with a bit of a delay. And I'm spoiled. I'm over here with an A7S III, an FX3. I have a Blackmagic 6K Pro if I need to use it. I have other things. I'm just looking forward to having this trinity of Sony sensors to use on a shoot, because it's really ideal. When doing interview subjects, I love to be able to set up with 2 cameras to have like a mid shot. My favorite being using the Zeiss 55 and then an 85 on a second camera for something a little tighter, while having a third body I can use for run and gun type of details and B-roll. Just as mostly a one-man crew when I'm doing freelance production, that just makes everything so much easier. And in the nearish future, I'll talk more about the gear I use during production, microphones, cameras, my favorite lenses, support type of gear. And while Sony is my main brand, I'm a fan of just about everything out there right now. It's such an amazing time to go gear shopping, because Canon has great things, Nikon has great things, Panasonic is amazing. There's so many great options, and even GoPros now are incredible. And DJI offers so many little types of cool cameras. Your phone is an amazing camera now. I mean, the barrier for entry into video production has really never been lower. You don't need these expensive cameras. Like an A7S III, $3,500, an FX3 is about $4,000. The A7IV is $2,500. This stuff is, we're not even getting into the higher end Blackmagic, Reds, Aries. All of that is way more expensive. But the options that currently exist for someone who's just starting, you can go get a Panasonic G7. I'm guessing you can get a used one for like $400 maybe. I don't know, some inflation's going on, maybe $500, but $500 for a Panasonic G7 would be a sweet entry into video production. And I tell anybody who's asking me about gear and what they should get, focus on your audio way before you worry about what kind of camera you're using. Your audio is more important. Your lens is even more important than the body that you're using. But really, audio is the key. That's where it's at. You got to have clean sound, and that doesn't cost a lot to get either. There are tiers, and you can go from $30, $50 all the way up to, thousands of dollars for audio recorders and microphones and things like that. But it doesn't take much to get some decent audio. If you were starting today and maybe you have a budget of like $800, you could get a decent camera, a fairly decent micro four thirds type of lens, and a relatively inexpensive microphone and field recorder situation, all inside of that budget, and be able to at least get started that way. And to me, that's amazing. That's mind-blowing that for $800, you could have that. But anyways, tangent aside, this is all, this episode, and probably the first several episodes of Take 22, are going to be more like a shotgun of rambling. I just wanted to mention what I was most excited about right now, and that's my A7IV that should ship in a couple of weeks, and hopefully I have that. But until it arrives, I'm super happy with an A7S III. I mean, I try to remind myself that I'm really lucky to have an A7S III. One, I think they're very hard to get right now, just with shipping and chip shortages and everything. So for me to even have an A7S III at the moment, I'm thrilled. And to pair it with an FX3, most people are trying to decide between the two. Do I have this one or this one? And I'm over here with both. So I feel really ecstatic. Plus, I've got my Blackmagic 6K Pro. I'm just tinkering with that. I've never used Blackmagic before, and I'll talk more about that later. But it's a monster to rig up and use. I mean, it doesn't have to be, but I've put a cage on it and the SSD holder, etc., and the battery grip. So I mean, it becomes something much bigger. But I'm very interested in checking out the hype on the image quality, working in B-RAW. I'm in the process of still getting used to DaVinci. It's not what I live in. I mostly edit in Final Cut, but I love that Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve is out there, and that, again, you can get it for free. So if you're on a low budget and you're just trying to get into this industry, it doesn't cost much to get your gear. You can get Blackmagic DaVinci Resolve downloaded for free and have a great editor, great software. I mean, you kids these days, you're so lucky. Back in my day, I started with a VHS camcorder, and actually, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to bring in one of my best friends, Marc Roberts, who I am friends with because he forced me to be his friend when we were 13 years old and just going into 7th grade. We were neighbors, saw each other around the neighborhood. We were actually in 6th grade together, but we never really talked. And in 7th grade, our very first period of the day was English, and we happened to be sitting right next to each other, and he wouldn't leave me alone. So we end up being friends, but it's great. Marc has been a huge influence on my life. He first introduced me to computers, and I think had I not had that experience at Marc's house at a really early age, and I'm talking 1989, then I wouldn't have been proficient later in life, because growing up, I didn't have a computer in my house, but Marc always did, and I was always on his. So just learning how to type and everything and work around a computer, I learned all at Marc's house because of Marc. So that's just a part of my journey that I credit to him. But there's another very important moment, a huge moment in my journey that Marc was there for, and I'm going to bring him on to the podcast right now, and he can help me tell that story. So what's coming up next is a segment that I'm just in my mind, I'm titling Once Upon a Time. And I think what I'm going to do is, when I feel the urge, I'm going to go through the timeline of how I started doing this up until where I'm at now. And instead of having like one rambling 3-hour podcast, I'm just going to put these little segments in to episodes as I go, because there's other things I want to talk about. I've got stuff coming up regarding my most recent feature film, which is, I'm going to say more about it later. But the good news is, the fun part is, I get to have some of the cast and people involved with making that film on Take 22, so you can hear the real story of behind the scenes stuff. And I'll talk more about what it was like making a movie on the next episode. And I don't really like talking about myself. I mean, I lived my story. I know it. It's boring to me, and there's nothing particularly special about it, but it's been brought to my attention that others may benefit just from relating to some of the particular circumstances, or just being in this industry in general. I mean, everyone's journey is different, and you've got to forge your own path. No two journeys are going to be the same. So all I can do is just share about my experience and the path I took to get where I am today. And that path was getting thrown out of my house at 18 years old and not having a clue of what I was going to do. And ultimately ending up where I can talk to you about having an A7S3 and an FX3 and working on projects and having a feature film that's completed. And if I can do any of that, anybody can achieve that. But for now, I'm bringing in my friend, Marc Roberts, for this Once Upon a Time. I have on with me now Mr. Marc Roberts, my lifelong, practically, friend. And he is a photographer, but he was also present the moment I first held a video camera. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. But Marc, tell the folks who you are.
Hello. Who am I? All-around computer nerd. I started doing photography back, I think, around the same time as you started playing with the video camera. I think it was 1988-ish, 87 maybe. So now I basically just do it as a hobby. Still, invested quite a bit recently in the last couple of years, and hopefully someday to make it a second career. But I just have fun with it and do landscape and wildlife mostly, some still life. Not really into portraits or weddings or anything like that.
Well, and you're in Nevada, so you have a lot of really interesting opportunities to get wildlife and landscapes and great astro stuff out there without a lot of light pollution, right?
Yeah. We're in northern Nevada. We have low humidity, fairly clear skies, dark skies, not in our immediate vicinity, but pretty close. So yeah, tons of wildlife and lots of wild horses. We do a lot of wild horse stuff. And when I say we, I mean my wife and I.
And you're also a Sony shooter. We're both mostly Sony shooters. And you just got 2 new lenses and we're playing with them. What lenses did you pick up?
I picked up the Samyang / Rokinon 85 millimeter 1.4 FE and the 35 millimeter 1.4 FE lenses, both the autofocus versions.
Nice.
I haven't had a huge chance to test out the 85 yet. Shot a few shots, but I did use the 35 quite a bit this weekend, and I love it so far.
Yeah, those are great lenses.
Yeah, I'm having a blast with them. I've never owned a 1.4 lens before. Like my fastest was a 1.8. The bokeh was it's kind of mind-blowing, and the amount of light gathered is really good as well.
And what kind of stuff were you shooting this weekend?
We had a nighttime paintball game with some glow-in-the-dark paintballs, and was trying to get some shots with that. And, I mean, obviously we didn't get any action shots, but did a little bit of posing and a little tripod work, and the A7IV just does so well in low light situations that definitely got some pretty cool shots. I mean, they're a little noisy, but can be expected at, ISO 10,000.
Yeah, the A7III is an amazing camera. It was game-changing at the time Sony launched it in early 2018. And I had just recently discussed, I sold mine, and currently I have my A7IV on pre-order, and who knows if that'll actually show up when they ship on the first, their first shipment. With the shipping the way it is, and sensor shortages, and pre-orders the way they are, the way they are traditionally with Sony, you just never know. It took me an extra couple of months to get my A7S III, so I don't have a lot of optimism about getting an A7IV before February. But these hybrid cameras that Sony makes are just amazing for so many purposes.
Oh, absolutely. I have the A9 as well that I picked up used a few months ago, and I love it. I mean, the autofocus just blows the A7III out of the water, but the low light capability of the A7 III is really, really great.
But let's take a moment and fire up the flux capacitor. I've brought you here to go back in time with me. And I believe this was Christmas break of 1988. Those are the 80s, kids. Dodgers had just won the World Series, and life was grand. I was visiting my neighborhood friend, Mark, which we were also in 7th grade at the time. And we're friends because we sat next to each other in English class, our first period in 7th grade, and had similar interests. But I was over at your house, and you had a family friend come over, Hank, and he had just bought himself a video camera. And in 88, video cameras were using VHS tapes. You had to throw it up on your shoulder with a hand strap and have that big viewfinder to look through. They're monsters. And he brought one over. It looked awesome. It was new tech. It was really cool. And I'm still shocked to this day. He handed it over to a couple of 13-year-olds or 12-year-olds at the time. I can't do the math. And say, yeah, you guys go ahead and play with these or play with this. And we went upstairs.
Totally
we took the camera upstairs and just messing around with it, pointing it at each other, saying dumb stuff. But I remember the actual moment in your hallway of you handing me the camera, me putting it on my shoulder and looking through the viewfinder for the first time. And there was just something about framing that shot and doing this thing that struck me. And it was a feeling I'd never had before. And I knew at that moment, even if just subconsciously, this is what I want to do. I just want to make things with this device and create. But video cameras back then were not cheap. And, certainly I couldn't purchase one as a minor. And I was almost certain my parents couldn't afford one at the time. So it was just kind of this, we got to play with it for an afternoon. Do you remember using the camera that day?
I don't really remember that. No, unfortunately, my memory is not near as good as yours, Matt. I remember vaguely playing with it. I think we were in the hall bathroom or something, doing some goofy things because the lighting was better in there. It was it had a bright light.
Right. Well, I think it just goes to the whole point of it being so transformative for me. And it was just, an afternoon of messing around for you. But for me, it was like, wow, the light bulb really came on. So much so that when I went home and told my mom, I got to play with a video camera, it blew my mind. I want to have a video camera and make things and make movies and make skits. It was so much fun. And, she's like, oh, well, that's really nice. That's cool. You got to play with a video camera. And she didn't say anything else about it. And I can't, I don't know the exact time frame, but it must have been about a month or two later. It was after Christmas, probably not quite spring yet of 89. And I came home from school one day and there was a giant box from JCPenney sitting on my kitchen table. And it had this video camera art on the side of it. And I remember seeing it and not comprehending what this was. And my mom's going, take a look. And I'm like, it was so out of my imagination that I'd have a video camera. I couldn't even, I'm opening the box and I'm still not understanding what's going on. And, I open it up and this camera's there and I pull it out. I'm holding this thing and I'm like, oh my God. My mom says, I know you wanted one and I got this for you. And this was from, I think I said it's from JCPenney. I have it still. Maybe I'll throw a picture up on the screen for the video version of the podcast. But I took that thing and it went with me everywhere. I was absolutely ecstatic. It was the best thing my mother's ever given to me. And she passed away in 2008. which was unfortunately before I even started really being a professional at what I do. So she never got to see the fruits of that purchase and what I've done with my love for cameras. But she planted that seed at a very young age, and she gave me the freedom to go out and shoot things. Now, we were shooting on VHS, and we were just doing dumb things. And I know you remember us doing dumb skits, and we'd have our buddies. Heavily influenced by In Living Color at the time, and just the freedom to make fun of things and be ourselves and create was amazing. And I was always the one pushing this going forward, like, hey, let's make this and let's do this. But all of my friends, you included, were so accommodating with all of these ridiculous ideas. And like everyone would buy into whatever plan I had to, we dressed up as popular pop culture characters and we just did so much. We did things for school, video projects for school that would get us kicked out of school today and probably be on the news. Like it was a different time period. It made the teachers nervous then because we'd turn over a video cassette and we'd be like, yeah, we made a video for our homework. And they'd put the tape into the class VCR and play it on the television, the tube television. And they didn't know what they were going to find out or what they were going to see in these videos. And some of the stuff we did was really not PC, but it was funny.
Not even close.
And we made some teachers sweat, but we got A's.
Oh, yeah. I remember thinking at the time, like, how did you guys not get in trouble for this? And this was back then. There's no doubt you would probably have been kicked out of school nowadays.
Oh, yeah, definitely couldn't do it now. And, the other interesting part of filmmaking at that age with the technology that we had was that everything had to be thought through about what would take place at what time, because you could record and then stop. And then record and then stop. So you'd have to plan out your video. There was no editing. There was no non-linear editing like it is now. And up until my senior year, I didn't have any access to any sort of video editing devices. And it was in my senior year when we finally had a video class at our high school that we used what's called the Toastmaster, I believe, or the toaster. Can't quite recall.
It was something like that.
Yeah. It was like this giant wall of stuff, and you would edit your video cassettes. You'd put your blank tape in one side, your tape that you had recorded on one side, and you would create this edit on your other cassette, and it's play and rewind and fast forward and record, and you'd have to edit that way. But up until then, it was like, okay, the first part is we got to do this, and then we're going to hit pause or stop, and then record the next thing again. So there's always these little static cuts in between everything and bad transitions.
Well, yeah, it was almost like a pause tape,
Yeah. Well, it was all so much fun, and it didn't occur to me at the time that this could really be a profession or something I could do with my life. I had spent all of my young years cartooning, drawing comic books, and drawing all these things. The video camera stuff was really fun, but the real thing I was doing as a teenager, along with you, was making music in a recording studio, creating songs and promoting ourselves under different names as this rap group. And that was our main focus it was my main focus. It
was your main focus.
You had a more well-rounded life. I was obsessed with making music along with, a few other of our friends. And I felt like that's where I was going to go in life. And that was important to me. Now, I'd always have my video camera. I took it to the studio. I would take it to school just to shoot stuff that was going on in my life. And people would look at me and be like, you're weird. You're walking around with a video camera all the time. What's up with that? And I was just like, why wouldn't I? And I'm so glad that I did, because now we can look back on a random day at high school and I have footage of all this stuff going on, and we could see how we dressed and how we acted and how the school looked then. And I find that to be very interesting. Now, today, kids can walk around with their phones and, you've got that going on pretty easy. But for me, I had to carry this camera around along with my book bag all around campus, sometimes, taking it on a bike to school, and we didn't live super close. But it never occurred to me that this was something that I would ever do professionally. I was given the opportunity to go to an arts academy on a scholarship, and the focus of that would have led me into creating digital art, which is essentially what Pixar became. However, at the time, I thought, that's ridiculous. Computer animation will never catch on. It doesn't look as good as drawn cell animation. No one's going to like this stuff. I'm not going to go to school for that. This is a decision I realized was ridiculous when Toy Story came out and was probably one of the best movies of all time and looked amazing. Now, I don't think I could have gone on and been that good at computer animation like that. I don't think that's where my skill set is. And I'm glad that I made the decision not to do that with my life. Although that would have been a productive move at the age of 17 or 18, because otherwise my life was about music, my life was about partying. I wasted quite a bit of time after graduation pursuing those things and girls and just having a good time. I never wanted to be in school. I always felt like I was in a prison, and I just wanted out and to get out and do music.
Yeah, you and me both. I mean, it was like 4 more years of school. Who the hell wants to do that?
Yeah, anything academic just drove me nuts. I always felt like I was in a cage. And even in my art classes that I took from 7th grade all the way through senior year, even in those art classes, I would screw off, or I would do the bare minimum to get my good grade, and then I would do whatever else I wanted. I would do the drawing I had to do for class, and then I'm working on my own drawings, or I'm writing lyrics, or I'm, writing letters to friends, or however, the ways we used to communicate prior to texting.
Yeah.
And I essentially wasted all of that academic time. Now, I don't know. I say I wasted it, but I was on my path. I was doing the things that made me what I am today. That's positive, a positive spin to it all. But I did really just I coasted through high school. And after high school, I was in the studio or I was partying, and I wasn't really thinking about a future.
What, a 19-year-old that just wants to party and have fun after high school? Come on.
Yeah, that was me,
Not
believe it or
me,
not.
no.
But what did you do after high school?
I applied for the California Summer School for the Arts and got a scholarship. It was only a month, but it was a really, really fun month of photography, and they made me draw, which, you were good at drawing. I can't draw anything. That's why I got into photography. It was because it was the only art that I was actually sort of good at. So I did that, and shortly after, I managed to become a father and then had to get a real job.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a commonality with us is at the time each of us became parents, which were not at the same time. But when it was clear that we were going to become parents, it was clear we had to take a different direction in our life. And I think I'll leave it right there and pick up the rest at another time. But I am so thankful to you, brother, that number one, that you forced me to be your friend when we were young, and that you got me over to your house, and that you had this family friend who happened to buy a video camera, and then had the trust in these 2 crazy kids to go off with his brand new expensive video camera and make stuff. Because without those things happening, I don't believe I would be where I am today. So thank you for that. And thanks for coming on the podcast to talk with me about it.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. My pleasure.
And that was my friend, Marc Roberts. It's great to have that conversation and think back to those original moments of getting that camera, because we did so much with that camera in the following handful of years. I mean, it's large, and I carried it to so many places and captured so many memories, and I still have that footage. I transferred from VHS to digital years ago, and I still get to have that footage. And now going back and looking at those old skits and things that we planned, it's funny to see how much I was actually directing at that time, with no idea that I would grow up to create content like this for a living. And I'll just keep moving up the timeline as I go in different episodes and try to paint a picture of the slow, tumultuous grind of being young and broke and not having the gear, and creating a brand pretty much out of hustle and sacrifice. So more about that as we go, but that's it for now. This is enough Take 22 for anyone to have to listen to. So you can follow me on Instagram at @mentalityfilms. Subscribe to this podcast, of course. And if you're a filmmaker yourself and you have content to share, to submit to festivals, or you just want to hear the type of feedback Dre and I give to people who submit to our festival, INDIEEYE Film Awards, go to INDIEEYEFilmAwards.com, and there you'll find all the links to the podcast, to the festival on Film Freeway, past winners, reviews we've written, and so on. But for now, that was my take.
You should have an outro, too.
Is that even necessary?
Well, just make it simple. Like, thanks for listening to Take 22.
Well, I guess that's the outro then. It doesn't matter. No one's listening anyways.